human-animal hybrids to be developed in Japan after ban controversially lifted. Supporters say research could be the first vital step to growing organs that could be transplanted into people. This is from The Independent. I'll read a few bits of this article, and then after that I'll get into how this correlates to the book of Matthew, the book of Giants, as well as the book of Enoch. So it starts off by saying, human-animal hybrids are to be developed in embryo form in Japan after the government-approved controversial stem cell research. Human cells will be grown in a rat and mouse embryos, then brought into term in a surrogate animal as part of experiments set to be carried out at the University of Tokyo. Supporters say the work, led by renowned geneticist, not going to pronounce that, could be a vital first step towards eventually growing organs that can be transplanted into people. But opponents have raised concerns that scientists are playing God. They worry that the human cells could stray beyond the targeted organs into other areas of the animal, effectively creating a creature that is part animal, part person. 100% that will happen. They already have the capability to do that completely. For this reason, such prolonged experiments has been effectively banned or gone unfinanced knowingly across the world in recent years. So that's pretty much the gist of the article. They're going to get into it. He says that they're going to take it really slow. They're only going to gestate these embryos for at the most up to 15.5 days, and that it will be years before they fully grow one and let one fully develop. Supposedly, that's what they say. Now, as well, as I have mentioned before, and something just to always be aware of, when stuff like this comes out and information is released to the public, you can guarantee that these experiments have been done behind closed doors. I mean, that's just common sense. These people in the government, they're trying to compete with other governments and always trying to be ahead of technology and be the leading powers, really. You can guarantee if they're admitting it to the public, it's already been done behind closed doors, and it's already been done on a way farther scale than what these beginning baby steps they supposed to. The very interesting thing about this and why it piques my interest is because of its correlation to Bible prophecy, the end times, and just the times that we're currently living in. One of the most famous statements within Bible prophecy that anybody who studies and researches Bible prophecy knows of is that in the end times it will be as in the days of Noah. Matthew 24:37 through 39 talks about this. It says, "But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be." So, the end times and the coming of Jesus Christ, his second coming, will be as in the days of Noah. It's super interesting, especially when we look at some of the extra biblical texts that talk about the days of Noah. Back in those days, the fallen angels were on the earth corrupting the seed of man, as well as just corrupting humans in general, teaching them forbidden knowledge, things that humans weren't supposed to ever learn. This is why the flood came. God brought a flood on the earth to wipe out the fallen angels, as well as the corruption that they were creating, the giants, the monsters that I'll explain in a minute. These different things that the fallen angels had brought and taught and were creating through their corruption from rebelling against God and being cast to the earth and corrupting the human race. This is why God brought a flood upon the earth. This is one of the reasons that God says in the story of Noah that men's hearts were just fixed on evil continually. They've been taught these horrendous things through the fallen angels. And then, of course, other humans corrupt as well, and that's just, how it goes. They start corrupting each other. But these fallen angels on the earth were the cause of this absolute corruption. In Genesis 6:4, as many know, it says, "There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became the mighty men which were of old, men of renown, the giants. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that the imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually." And that's what was going on. And then it gets into the story of Noah and how God had to wipe out all living things because all living things, including animals, had been corrupted. And we know this through such extra biblical texts, as they're called, words that are not part, or books that are not part of the Bible, such as the book of Enoch and the book of Giants. The Book of Giants and the Book of Enoch has some very interesting things to say about this subject. And just to state, I don't believe that this is the word of God, but this is history. This is the history. These people weren't just sitting around making this stuff up. This is the things that were actually going on. One of the most interesting things from the Book of Giants, which we only have fragments of it. Many of the old manuscripts and texts, many of them are just fragmented pieces, and so we don't have the entire book, the entire letter, whatever the case may be. But this fragment from the Book of Giants is one of the most interesting, and it's 4Q531 fragment 2, and it says, they defiled blanks because the fragments, they begot giants and monsters. They begot, and behold, all the earth was corrupted. So again, here we have another text talking about the fallen angels interbreeding with humans as well as animals, creating giants and monsters. Those are two different things. If they were the same, they would just say giants or monsters. Completely different. Later on in the Book of Giants, it talks about all these different animals. They took 200 of donkeys and this and that and this and that, and they took them for miscegenation, which is interbreeding. So the fallen angels were interbreeding with animals, creating beings half fallen angel, half animal. And some of these things could actually think. They had the ability to think. They had intelligence, actually. And within the Book of Giants, it says that one of them had a dream of a giant flood coming, and they actually went to Enoch to get an interpretation of the dream, and he told them that is what would take place. So it's just extremely interesting. The fallen angels were mixing themselves with humans, creating giants, as well as themselves with animals, creating monsters. Exactly what is going on right now in Japan, and as well as just everywhere. It's already been going on. These tests have been going on. Of course, they're proceeding into figuring out how to mix these things. I mean, they've already released in the past, they've cloned sheep. They've mixed some animals they've mixed animals, not human and animals, but here they go, mixing humans and animals, just like they did back in the days, just like the Book of Giants tells us. This is the forbidden knowledge that God didn't want us to have. If you read the Book of Enoch, it talks about the different angels that came down and the different things that they taught to humans, witchcraft, making weapons, one of them creating mirrors and talking about makeup and stuff like that. They taught humans knowledge that God did not want them to know. God was grieved. It talks about in Genesis that God repenteth that he made man. It grieved him that he had made man, and so that's why he decided to flood the earth. That's why he gave Noah, who he had found favor with, to the ability to know and to understand that the flood was coming, so Noah, his sons, and their wives could get on the ark and survive. And we know that Noah was not pure in the sight of that he was sinless. First off, because we know that Jesus is the only one who ever lived who was sinless. The Bible also tells us that no, there's not one who is good, but all have sinned and all fall short of the glory of God. That's what the Bible teaches. As well as we know is after they made landfall, Noah, he started to become a drunkard, and his sons had to cover him up, his nakedness up. So Noah wasn't this pure, perfect person, but he was not corrupted. I believe that it's because he was not corrupted by the genetics of the fallen angels, as well as he hadn't turned aside to the teachings of the fallen angels, the forbidden teachings that are mentioned in the Book of Enoch. So we know through biblical texts that fallen angels intermingled with human beings, creating the men of renown, the mighty men of the old days, Genesis 6:4. So we can look at these other extra biblical texts from stories of the people at the time talking about what was going on, and it's not a far stretch to think that they were mixing as well with animals and creating intelligent monsters, which is what the Book of Giants says multiple times. They created monsters, angel and animal mixes, and it's just extremely interesting to see that that's what's going on right now. Human-animal hybrids to be developed in Japan after the ban that was in place to not mix humans with animals. We're seeing this take place, just like in the days of Noah. But again, this stuff has been going on, of course. If it's mentioned to us, then of course they've been doing it. A good thing to look at is some of the planes that we use in the Air Force and stuff like that in the United States that they openly talk about and openly admit were created and built in the 1960s. So when it was way classified then, and then when they start to open this stuff and release it and say this is what we have, they've already had it for at least 10 to 20, 30 years, if not longer. It's unimaginable what they actually have that of course they won't release because many reasons really. But a very interesting correlation to the days of Noah, because the exact same thing is starting to go on. We'll see if they start creating monsters. Maybe they start creating some of the monsters that will be unleashed in the end times. We know, as the Bible says, and as I mentioned in my last video, men's hearts will fail them for things coming upon the earth. So one way or another, something's going to be walking the earth that's going to cause and strike so much fear into people that they will actually die through fear. And there's so much unimaginable things that are going to take place during the time of the book of Revelation is revealed on the earth, that I'm sure it's a mixture of things: the bottomless pit, open portals, people creating these monsters that get on the loose. I mean, they already have monsters, I'm sure, underground, and they've tested and created these things and they have them living. It's unimaginable really to think about what's truly going on. But without a doubt, they have these hybrids already, and this is not the beginning of these tests taking place. Very interesting, just more of Matthew 24 taking place. I mean, if you haven't read Matthew 24, read Matthew 24 and then look at the correlations going on in the times that we're living in right now. For sure, the beginning of sorrows, maybe even the beginning of the tribulation. Not sure exactly, but I would say for sure, at least, the beginning of sorrows. And one of the most important things, if not the most important thing, to remember from Matthew 24 is 44 through 46. And it says, "Therefore be ye also ready, for in such an hour as ye think not the Son of Man cometh. Who then is a faithful and wise servant, whom his Lord hath made ruler over his household, to give them meat in due season? Blessed is that servant whom his Lord, when he cometh, shall find so doing." So the Lord wants us to be watchful, mindful, and Jesus, I don't believe, can come any second and then we're all going to be raptured. I don't believe in the secret rapture theory. It's not in the Bible. But whatever the case may be, we need to live our life as if that is the case, that Jesus could come tomorrow, in the sense that we want to be living a life that if Jesus were to come tomorrow, he would say, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been living faithfully and following me." And just like in Matthew 24, later it says, in verse 48, "But and if that evil servant shall say in his heart, My Lord delayeth his coming," and then go off and eat and drink and be drunk and not follow God, then the Lord will not look upon that servant with favor, obviously, and their salvation is in question. So the Lord wants us to live as if he's coming tomorrow, so that we are living as he commanded us and doing what he wants us to do, being a good and faithful servant. That's the most important thing any Christian should want to be done in life, in the afterlife forever, is that when we see Jesus, he says, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Something to keep an eye on here. This is interesting stuff. Thanks for watching. God bless.